Have you ever felt as though your heart might shatter under the weight of invisible burdens? Have you ever smiled at others while inside a storm of emotions raged? Are you searching for the root cause of your exhaustion and yearning for a way to heal your spirit? You must understand that the heart of a deeply sensitive person is not an endless sponge that can soak up every pain. There is a silent limit where the soul, after days of accumulating wounds, suddenly ignites an inner fire. That awakening knows neither age nor circumstance. It can occur when you are weary from carrying too many hopes, when you feel tense under invisible pressures, or when you feel powerless before the multitude of roles you must fulfill. In a world spinning with work demands, family responsibilities, and an endless stream of must-be-perfect standards, many of us force ourselves to appear strong, from financial stress to societal expectations. Every well-meaning encouragement to try harder or never show weakness inadvertently adds grains of sand to our souls, which over time become sharp fragments piercing deep within. Then, one day your mind can bear no more. Emotions surge so fiercely that you must stop and confront yourself. That is the moment the hidden fire awakes, a power within that emerges only when every wound has been piled to the brink. Awakening is not rebellion, but the first step on the journey of healing, recognizing the pain, discovering ways to release it, and unlocking the power that guides the soul. When your wounds reach the threshold of endurance, the sensitive person ceases to be a mere observer and becomes a mirror, reflecting every darkness around, from silent grief to hidden bitterness. Yet, astonishingly, they do not stop at reflection. They begin to absorb and integrate that darkness into themselves. Within the depths of the heart, feelings such as resentment, anxiety, and righteous anger labeled negative are pushed down until, under the weight of compounding tragedies, the loss of loved ones, feelings of betrayal or unmet expectations, all that unspoken suffering erupts violently. The once gentle lamb transforms into a formidable being, for they have touched the shadow within. That shadow is not merely socially condemned desires or mistakes, but latent energy housing the aspects of self we once deemed unacceptable. It may be the longing to live for oneself rather than for others, the righteous anger at exploitation, or a profound sorrow with no shore in sight. When the shadow is recognized and embraced, it no longer weighs like a stone on the heart, but becomes an inner flame, a source of strength to protect and affirm the self. In the very moment we look directly into the darkness, we cease to be victims of circumstance and become the smith of our own being. We learn to accept both light and dark, no longer fearing to sacrifice comfort for authenticity. Instead of being driven by the fear of judgment, we use that very shadow as a springboard for freedom and creativity. Often, within the darkness of sensitive hearts lie countless sorrows, casual criticisms from parents, unspoken expectations of teachers, wordless comparisons among friends, and subtle manipulations at work. From childhood, to maintain harmony, many learn to bury their righteous anger extinguish the desire for recognition, and forget their right to feel genuinely. They become masters at reading others' deciphering glances, tones, even unspoken needs, yet lose connection with themselves. Their personal instinct is driven into a deep silence, a chasm where wounds find no voice and quietly accumulate into a vast shadow. This shadow is not merely sadness or disappointment, but latent energy that contains blurred, righteous anger, a limited sense of self-worth, and the fear of losing one's existence. When living perpetually in endurance mode, the empath forgets that they also have the right to speak up and the right to push back in a healthy way. Each unconditional yes they utter is, in effect, a ticket relinquishing their power to someone else. Over time, the shadow grows larger, waiting until the sensitive person can endure no more, and then erupts in a fierce wave, both liberating and overwhelming if one is not properly prepared. Identifying and confronting the shadow is the first step toward unlocking one's inner power. It permits oneself to hear the silenced voice, allows righteous anger to find an outlet, and transforms darkness into steady momentum on the path to self-mastery. Often, within the darkness of sensitive hearts, lie countless sorrows, inadvertent criticisms from parents, unspoken expectations of teachers, silent comparisons from friends, and subtle manipulations at work from childhood. In order to maintain harmony, many learn to bury their righteous anger, extinguish their desire for recognition, and forget their right to exist with genuine emotions. They become masters of perception, deciphering glances, tones, and even unspoken needs of others, yet lose connection with themselves. Their personal instinct is driven into a deep silence where all wounds find no place to express themselves, quietly dwelling and accumulating into a vast shadow. This shadow is not merely sadness or disappointment, but latent energy containing blurred righteous anger, a constrained longing for self-affirmation, and the fear of losing one's sense of worth. Narcissists often underestimate sensitive people, mistaking vulnerability for weakness. In reality, sensitivity is a refined radar, capable of detecting every subtle shift in the soul, from a fleeting glance to a soft whisper. When the pressure to endure and harmonize endlessly burns away the last layer of protection, the sensitive person awakens with a clarity as sharp as a blade. In that moment, they are no longer blinded by flattering allure or empty promises. They see through seductive masks, power plays, and the narcissist's insatiable hunger for validation. They not only perceive the glossy facade, but also sense the archetype of the predator, a psychic vampire who silently drains the emotional energy of others. The power of the sensitive person in that moment does not lie in the ability to strike back violently, but in absolute awareness. They fully understand the manipulation tactics, recognize every sign of gaslighting, and sense the undetected fear hidden beneath the grand facade. Rather than reacting according to a pre-written script, they maintain calm composure, refusing to let anyone define who they are, no longer caught in emotional traps. They break free from the web of deceit, and the steadfast silence alone is enough to force the manipulator to reveal their true nature. At that point, sensitivity ceases to be a weakness and becomes the sharpest weapon, the capacity to see through darkness and stand firm in truth. No longer fearful and no longer controlled, when that moment of clarity arrives, the sensitive person no longer frantically tries to heal irreparable wounds, but begins reclaiming the light that has always shone within a process of internal chemical reaction. Imagine a container filled to the brim with accusations, demands for perfection, and manipulative words, both spoken and concealed. We have consumed that poison, believing that love means endurance and that forgiveness means erasing every sin. In reality, love does not require one to sacrifice the self for another, and forgiveness does not condemn one to remain a perpetual victim. In the furnace of suffering, when we realize that another's cruelty does not stem from deliberate malice, but is merely the expression of a wounded soul trembling before its own inner darkness, we begin transforming the poison into wisdom. The new power of the sensitive person is not an uncontrolled rage, but the authority that comes from seeing the essence of truth. No more illusions, no more masks, only razor-sharp clarity that allows us the freedom to choose how we respond rather than being swept along by someone else's narrative. When we stand in that truth, every manipulative tactic and every accusation loses its grip. Because no one can deny our intrinsic worth, this process of self-transformation becomes the foundation for the journey ahead, fortifying boundaries, affirming self-value, and radiating light for ourselves and those around us. When the sensitive person decides to rise from the seat of silent container, they do more than reject the victim role. They open a door to true power. They realize that strength does not lie in thunderous shouts, but in the ability to refuse to let anyone, whether spouse, child, or boss, define their worth. In today's society, many struggle with depression and anxiety under the pressure to always be okay. They suppress emotions for fear of missing out on promotions, losing friends, or being labeled unprofessional. Yet this need to please others actually stifles genuine power. When the sensitive person relinquishes that need, they begin to stand firmly in their own truth, a state in which, in their mind's eye, there is no longer a flight from conflict, but the image of themselves facing every challenge with courage. No sword or harsh words are needed. Steadfast silence and unwavering conviction are enough to make the manipulator hesitate. In that moment, the sensitive person wields an invisible power, the ability to choose not to participate in the control game, not to react according to a scripted scenario. It is this resolute stance that overturns the manipulator's power, for there is no emotional bait left to exploit. This newfound power is the foundation for building healthy boundaries and restoring self-respect. In the next section, we will explore how to reinforce personal limits and cultivate self-esteem as we continue on the path of individuation. Dreams of encountering a wild beast or becoming lost in the dark are not fanciful. They are the language of the unconscious, revealing the shattered pieces of the soul. Many people today experience nightmares of being pursued, losing their voice, or wandering through the endless turns of a shattered mirror maze, each image illustrating a crisis of identity and a silenced inner voice. When the sensitive person stops fleeing the beast that represents suppressed fear and anger, they awaken to the truth that they are the rightful owner of that energy. In the dream of integrating the shadow, the beast is no longer an enemy, but a mirror reflecting righteous anger, self-respect, and the buried desire for recognition. Like a diamond cutter, they must endure pain and pressure to polish themselves until the raw gem shines, free of the impurities imposed from without. More importantly, for they realize that personal boundaries are not rigid walls, but a shield protecting the soul, flexible enough to let love and sharing flow through, yet strong enough to block hurtful words and manipulative acts. By mastering the dream, they learn to set boundaries based on their own values, unafraid of losing anyone, prioritizing the integrity of their own being. From this point on, the dream is no longer a terrifying nightmare, but a corridor leading to inner freedom, a space where the sensitive person can confront the darkness, embrace their true energy, and emerge into radiant light. Those sensitive souls, not yet awakened, are like uncut diamonds, hidden beneath layers of fear and self-denial. In the social media era, anyone can fall into the trap of comparison, counting likes, scrolling through envy-inducing feeds, pressured to appear perfect in others' eyes. Each compliment or criticism, each virtual count is absorbed like a sharp needle, digging deep into self-esteem. But eventually, the empath asks, "Enough, I cannot remain a sponge soaking up everyone's wounds." That is the moment they cease absorbing pain for others and begin accepting themselves. By refusing to endure further, they ignite a fierce inner flame, a light of truth that is not gentle but blazing, powerful enough to burn away lies and expose subtle manipulations. That light is their authentic voice, no longer shrouded by the fear of judgment. When the inner fire bursts forth, manipulators become bewildered, for they cannot conceal their own cracks before that transparent power. The empath's steadfast silence and blazing light are both the antidote to fear and the sharp blade that strips away every mask. From this point on, the empath no longer fears the light within. On the contrary, they use it to illuminate their path of individuation and inspire other lost souls to dare to shine themselves. When the empath learns to love themselves first, they unlock true freedom. Freedom does not mean isolation, but knowing how to set boundaries like gates open to let love in, yet firm against harm. They realize that self-worth is not measured by acts of sacrifice, but by honesty with one's own feelings. This unsettles the manipulator completely, for they can no longer exploit someone who refuses to fall into emotional traps. The awakened empath not only liberates themselves from a specific toxic relationship, but also shatters the very archetype of the victim manipulator cycle, recognizing power plays disguised as care and opting out of that drama. Their strength emerges from transforming suffering into resilient boundaries and rejecting deception. By putting themselves first, the empath opens the door to genuine freedom, a freedom that is not about withdrawal, but about establishing firm yet flexible limits like gateways. Those gateways allow love to flow into their lives while resolutely blocking any hurtful words or actions. They gradually come to understand that self-value is not determined by how much they sacrifice, but by their authenticity in honoring their emotions and needs. When they dare to say no to unreasonable demands and cease enduring mockery, they demonstrate to themselves and others that self-respect is not selfishness, but the foundation of healthy love. This disorients the manipulator completely because there is no longer anyone to manipulate emotionally. The awakened empath not only frees themselves from a toxic bond, but dismantles the recurring victim manipulator drama once one side stops playing their role. The show cannot go on. They identify power plays hidden beneath the guise of care and find the courage to leave or redefine interactions. The empath's true power lies in converting pain into sturdy, invisible boundaries, barriers no lie or manipulative act can breach. In that refusal, the empath reclaims ownership of their life, creating a new beginning where freedom, self-respect, and authenticity flourish each day. The empath's awakening journey does not end with reclaiming personal power. It also opens their eyes to manipulation patterns hidden in every relationship, from family and friends to the workplace. They realize that as long as they believe, "I must endure to keep the peace," they remain imprisoned by their own consent. Breaking free of that illusion, they begin to question old habits. Why am I not allowed to say no? Why do I keep agreeing even as I grow weary? In that moment, they see the shadow of self-doubt nourished by childhood messages, like "only a good child deserves love" or "do not upset the adults." Challenging these false beliefs marks the start of their liberation journey. They identify the fear of rejection and the need for approval, then transform them into the momentum of self-determination. They learn to distinguish between gentleness in communication and acceptance of exploitation, allowing them to assert boundaries and refuse demands that violate their core values. Finally, when the empath is no longer swept up in the cycle of enduring to be acknowledged, they become more self-directed. They choose relationships based on mutual respect and invest their energy in genuine connections, rather than remaining immersed in the false glow of others' expectations. A dream is the language of the unconscious, reflecting an inner journey that the conscious mind struggles to reach. Jung emphasized that many empaths will experience nightmares of being pursued, losing their voice, or becoming lost in a maze of shattered mirrors, symbols of a psyche that has forgotten its own way home. These images are not vague portents, but profound reminders that a part of us is crying out to be seen and healed. As the inner work deepens, the fabric of those dreams gradually transforms. Instead of endlessly fleeing the beast that represents fear, the empath slows, turns to face the pursuer, and emerges from the fractured labyrinth into a sunlit meadow, this vision symbolizes the power of reclaiming the self, not through avoidance, but through the courage to confront and pass through darkness. In waking life, many people find themselves waking with a curious sense of relief. They no longer rush to answer every message or feel compelled to fix someone else's pain. They simply sit quietly and listen to their own hearts. Emotions, long suppressed, are now welcomed and held without judgment or hasty explanation. That moment of dream transition marks the beginning of a profound harmony between conscious and unconscious, empowering the empath to restore their inner strength. That power radiates outward, preserving peace within the soul, while granting the resilience to face life's storms with growing confidence and freedom. True love is not an endless sequence of endurance, but a skillful balance between giving and receiving. The awakened empath understands early on that to love others sustainably, they must first learn to love themselves. Setting clear boundaries is not building isolating walls, but designing protective gates, allowing love to flow in healthily while blocking what causes harm. When the empath dares to say, enough in the face of invisible pressures from family, friends, or colleagues, they do not become rigid or insensitive, but instead grow stronger. They come to trust that prioritizing their own emotions and needs is not selfish, but fundamental to sustaining deep, lasting relationships. For example, a middle-aged teacher who devoted herself so completely to students and colleagues that she neglected her own needs felt a great sense of relief. The first time she told the administration, "I need a break to recharge," her honesty was not only appreciated by her peers and students, but inspired them to value self-care as well. Establishing boundaries allows the empath to give love without fear of exploitation, and at the same time to accept support, praise, and sharing when genuinely needed. Refusing unreasonable demands does not fracture relationships. On the contrary, it builds trust rooted in mutual respect. Through this journey, the empath affirms their own value and eventually shines with a love that is free and steadfast. The final transformation brings the empath into a state of wholeness, where they no longer avoid either their light or their darkness, but embrace both fully. They do not lose sensitivity. They elevate it into a profound gift of empathy and compassion for themselves and society. Simultaneously, they construct firm boundaries to protect their inner space, avoiding being swept into emotional dramas that are not theirs to carry. In the modern world, where information overload and the demand for instant responses can unsettle anyone, the whole empath does not chase that whirlwind. They choose to remain silent amid the storm, not rushing to judge, not being swept along by social media drama, but listening to their inner values before making decisions. It is precisely that calm that enables them to respond wisely and consistently to what truly matters. In the state of wholeness, the empath understands the power of gratitude, of letting go of the past, and daring to step into the present with open arms. They are no longer governed by the urgings of the crowd, but live to their own rhythm. Every decision based on inner truth rather than others' expectations. When a whole empath awakens, They become a source of inspiration for their community, proof that in a chaotic world, one can still find peace and flourish. They guide others with their own inner light, drawing the map of true freedom not only for themselves, but for all who long to live authentically and fully. When the empath reaches the threshold of their inner dawn, they do more than free themselves from the darkness of a toxic relationship. They shatter the endless victim-manipulator cycle. With newfound energy of freedom, they inspire those around them, planting the belief that anyone can love without sacrificing the self. They do not stop at protecting themselves, but also share the fundamental question: does this relationship bring me genuine joy? When one friend in the group decides to leave an abusive partnership, the entire circle comes together to discuss, learn to establish safe boundaries, and support one another on the healing journey. That ripple effect reveals that freedom is not isolation, but the ability to connect healthily based on mutual respect. This community ripple effect creates a support network where awakened empaths not only light their own path, but open the way for others to step out of the darkness. When one person dares to say enough, they spark a spreading miracle. The next person finds encouragement. The one after is bolstered. The empath's true power is not merely the inner flame that warms themselves, but the brilliant light that illuminates the shared path. Through personal transformation, they build communities of understanding and compassion, places where each person can live their truth without fear of harm and always feel supported. This is the spirit of the awakened empath. In concluding this journey, we have accompanied sensitive hearts on the path from suffering to awakening. Unlocking inner strength. As psychological healers, we want you to remember 5 key steps. Identify the limits of endurance. The sensitive heart is not an endless sponge. Sometimes the inner flame must ignite to protect against collapse. Encounter the inner shadow. All repressed pain and pressure become a shadow that needs acknowledgement rather than concealment to maintain a gentle exterior. Transmute through wisdom in the crucible of suffering. We learn to turn the poison of guilt and manipulation into insight, seeing through the manipulator's tactics and masks. The power of clarity. When you stop reacting to a pre-written script, you stand in inner truth, the strongest weapon that causes every form of control to fall away. Harmony and radiance. Individuation is not only an inner journey, but a collective mission. Build healthy boundaries. Love yourself first. Then inspire freedom and empathy in your community. We have together initiated the inner healing process, from understanding wounds to re-establishing limits, from dissolving the shadow to igniting the light of truth. Keep nurturing that flame. For every sensitive soul that awakens is a lighthouse guiding countless others toward genuine freedom.